Hey, it's Jane. We're talking about sales and sales leadership. I left a meeting not too long ago with a salesperson that I am coaching. And we got in the car, and he said to me, Jane, what do you think the client meant when they said, and he finished the sentence. And I had one of those like total V8 moments because I'm thinking to myself, are you freaking kidding me? We just left a meeting with this customer. And if you had a question, that was the person to ask the question to, not me, right? So it occurs to me that this is something that I run up against more frequently than I would like to. And that is that there are a lot of scenarios where salespeople should be asking at least one more question, and they don't. And I don't know why they don't. I don't know if they're afraid that they're going to get to a no. They're afraid it's going to make them look stupid. I don't know what the reason is. But there are certain scenarios where you should always ask one more question. And I'm going to give you a few of them. The first one is to clarify terminology and buzzwords. So every industry has buzzwords and terms that are completely meaningless. Bleeding edge, cutting edge, full service, end-to-end solution, these kinds of things. Anytime you hear something like that, you need to ask another question. And you might say to a client, hey, you know, end-to-end solution means a lot of things to our different clients. Tell me what it means to you. Get them to clarify exactly what that means so you're solving the right problem, right? You understand and you're headed in the right direction. Second scenario is what I call yellow lights. And I'd love to say that I was smart enough to come up with this term, but it's Mahan Khalsa all day. And I love his brain. So sometimes I use his stuff. A yellow light is a scenario where something happens during the conversation, and you know that little amygdala in the back part of your brain's going, uh-oh, something's up. Unfortunately, most of the time when that happens, salespeople do the same thing that I do when I'm driving and I see a yellow light, which is hit the gas. In my scenario, you know, in my car, I don't want to wait at the red light. In a sales scenario, sometimes it's because that red light is a no or a shutdown. But don't be afraid of a no, because if it's a customer that's not, if it's a prospect that's not going to be good for you, let's get to the no fast and move on to somebody that's going to be a great prospect. Don't be afraid of that. So a yellow light situation happens. Take the time to slow down and ask another question to the customer. Examples of a yellow light. They keep looking at their watch. They don't seem to be engaged. They don't seem to be the decision maker. You don't seem to have all the right people in the room. The decision-making criteria doesn't seem to be clear to that customer. They don't know how they're going to make a decision. In all those kinds of scenarios, you need to slow down and ask another question. And I call it asking a hard question in a soft way. So you might say, Jane, let me just stop you for a second. I noticed that you've glanced at your watch a couple times. Is there a time constraint that you have that I need to be sensitive to? Slow down for that yellow light. Let them make it green or red. But either way, the customer is taking you to that next step. Another scenario would be when the client makes vague statements or asks vague questions like, how long is it going to take you to get back to me? Or how will I know that you're the right person to hire? Well, those are valid questions, but compared to what, right? How will you know that I'm the best person to hire compared to who? Compared to what? That's a question about decision-making criteria. And so I would want to go back to that customer and say, man, you beat me to the punch. I'm glad you asked that question. How will you know I'm the right person to hire? What are the decision-making criteria that you're going to be using to determine what great looks like? The final one is what I call blockers. Things that come up in conversation where the client might not see it as a blocker, but it really is a blocker for us. For example, my boss doesn't really want to do this. What do you do with that, right? You ask another question. Well, what would it take to get your boss to be really excited about doing this? Or what's your thinking about proceeding with this, even though you know your boss is probably going to shoot it down? How can I help you with that? But Don't get to the place where you get in the car and you say to yourself, I wonder what the customer meant when they said. Always ask another question. Now this is a skill set that takes a lot of practice, but the very first thing you need to practice is recognizing the opportunities here to ask another question. So I would say to you, we'll talk about this skill and how to do this maybe in another video. Today, what I want you to think about is, how do I start recognizing these opportunities to ask another question? Recognizing the opportunities to clarify. Once you do that, then we'll figure out how to get you really great at asking that hard question. I hope this was helpful.